Hi guys, this is Seth Christensen with the Got Any Cows podcast. 20 years ago, I was an 11-year-old kid with 2 bucket calves. Today, we have sent genetics from our company to 40 of the 50 states and 12 countries around the world. I still learn more every day, and I invite you to learn along with me. We are here on another episode of the Got Any Cows podcast. I'm lucky I've got my buddy David Tanner here with me.
Good to be here, Seth.
Yeah, David arrived in an airplane today, which is atypical. David's driven many a mile, many a time to be in and out of this location. But how was the airplane ride today, David?
It was entertaining. I can't say I'd rather drive than fly anytime, day or night. It's the airlines are not what they used to be, so it really just kind of sucks sometimes. But
Yeah.
you know, make the most of it. Drive an extra 3 hours, so you cut one flight out just to make sure you catch a flight here and join some time with y'all.
You bet. I appreciate you doing it, buddy. And I say, tell us about your knee is hurting you and everything else right now. I mean, I appreciate you coming because like you are hurting today, brother.
It's been a little painful the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Between getting kicked in the ribs and calf muscles and tweaking knees of horses and cows, and still got to keep doing something every day. So
yeah.
Finally broke down yesterday. Went and saw the orthopedic. He said everything was all right. I just need to be a smart, intelligent person and stop moving for a couple of days. So I jumped on a plane and fly 2,000 miles.
Yeah, just as well.
Yeah,
Makes
better than
sense to
driving.
me. Yeah.
Better idea than driving. So we're good for that part.
I tell you what, that's one of my goals today, buddy, is just help people understand just how much there is to what you do. I think a lot of times people take a look at cows leaving Idaho and coming to wherever, and it's just, Google Maps here to there, and it can't be that hard, but there's quite a little bit to it. And so I'm looking forward to having you kind of educate everybody as to what that process is like. But backing up, give us a little bit of your background, David, who you are, where you're from. Tell us your story.
Grew up between Texas and Wyoming, and done pretty much anything you do in horses or cows. Went to college, technically dropped out of high school, and I got in some trouble, so dropped out of high school, got my GED, went to college from there, and just kind of built my business. I was a horse shearer and red race horses and whatnot, and had cowboyed and day worked and done everything you could think of at that point. And then I was shooting horses and had a lady approach me one time about hauling some horses, so I started doing that a little bit. And my old friend Lucky Juergens used to run the Clear Creek farm there in Florida, old Doc's place over there. He asked me to be the hauler for their sale.
Okay.
So that was my first initiation of actually a Wagyu and Akiushi breed. Mm-hmm. And I think they had 70-something live lots, and I hauled 50-something of those live lots on my first trip.
Good.
And I was lucky enough to meet a lot of folks, and of course, I love hauling cattle, but I really just fell in love with this breed in general. The Wagyu and the Akiushi are fun. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, between growing up in Texas, Wyoming, I've been everywhere in the country when I was young, and now being a hauler, I really covered some country.
Oh, man. Yeah, I say, how many of the states have you driven through, David?
49 of the 50.
Just missing Hawaii, I guess,
That's
where you can't drive to that one.
They won't give me a ferry. They will not give me a ferry to Hawaii, and it just kind of pisses me off. But really, I'm not missing anything on them black sands. I'll pass.
We flew some bulls to Hawaii, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. A company called Pacific Airlift actually came, picked them right up, staged them out of Fresno, and flew them to the Big Island. So shout out to my buddy Joey out that way, bought some Angus bulls from us, and via my uncle Kyle. So Jacob's dad actually lined that deal up.
Oh, we
worked
did.
out really good.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of fun. So yeah, we've sent them out that way, but that'd be one of the few loads you didn't haul. Would be
that's the only one I probably haven't touched yet. But hey, if we get me some paddles and some wings or flippers or something, I might give it a shot. Heck, I'm not scared.
If anyone could get them there, it would be you.
I'd give her a try. I'd play hob. Let's just put it that way without using profanity. I would give her hob.
You'd get it figured out. So walk us through, David. What I'm kind of hoping today is that by the end of this episode, people will just have their heads wrapped around what it takes, to move these cattle from point A to point B. And so I'm kind of looking to walk through kind of right from the beginning of the process, from the moment I say, hey, David, we've got this animal. It's going to go from point A to point B all the way through to somebody receiving an animal and just them grasping what that takes. Because like you and I've talked about, and you've driven piles more miles than what I have, but I've driven just enough to understand it's a significant undertaking. Moving live animals is significantly different than, not towing anything or even just towing inanimate objects. It's quite a little bit different, moving animals around. So starting kind of at the very beginning of the process, right from the time I call you or even just putting anybody else in my shoes, if somebody's scheduling a load with you, what does that look like?
Well, it's kind of hard to explain sometimes because a lot of folks have this idea that I Googled and it's 10 hours and 27 minutes.
Right.
And they fail to realize that, take Google and throw it out the window.
Yep.
because, it always depends on the time of day or evening or whatnot, or, is it good weather, bad weather, what's time of year?
Yep.
If it's summertime, like August, September, July through August, we all deal with it in this country.
Yep.
The oppressive heat.
Yep.
If you're going through the desert, you're hitting 110 to 120 degrees.
Right.
And that puts it at 120 to 130 degrees inside that stock trailer.
Yep.
People don't stop and think.
Right.
So there's a lot of times I won't drive at night or drive during the day. I apologize.
Yep.
I won't drive during the day. I'll drive at night more.
Yep.
To keep it a little cooler on those animals.
Sure.
Flip the script in the wintertime.
Yep.
And we love our northern winters.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah.
when you're seeing negative 20 on the outside and people are like, oh, you should be able to drive, partner. It's negative 40 or 50 inside that trailer.
Right.
And I'm not freezing our stock.
Yeah. Yep.
And I take the pride in the fact that when I look at these animals, they're my animals.
Yeah.
From the time they get loaded up, they're mine.
Yep.
So when I'm looking at logistics of stuff, you
Yep.
when you call me up for a haul, Dave, I got some to go to Texas. Right? And I got Texas, I got Kansas, I got Kentucky and Tennessee.
Yep.
Well, now I'll start figuring out my waypoints.
Right.
And I've been in this business long enough. I got a lot of contacts with ranches and farms and fairgrounds and sale barns sometimes, depending on where I'm at. And I'll use every resource I can a lot of times. And then I'm lucky enough, again, that I've done this long enough. I've developed that reputation that people will let me work a route up if I don't have something in particular.
Right.
And that really is a cost-saving factor for everybody.
That's huge. That's huge.
I tell everybody I don't ever want it to be where you could drive and return home for what it cost me to haul your stock. So if you bought one cow going from here to Texas, it shouldn't cost you more than $1,000. And there's a lot of people, and I catch a lot of criticism from folks who are, well, you don't charge enough, or you charge too much. Well, I want to be fair because I'm in the cattle business.
Yeah. Yep.
And I know what it takes for all of us to make this life work.
Right.
It's a struggle every day.
Yep.
And doing what I'm doing, I am lucky enough. I've got a lot of clients and just resources that are at my disposal.
Yep.
And so I figure out where I can get my hay at. It's the best quality hay I can afford to feed cows. Making sure my trailers are clean, my trucks are, as good as we can get them.
Yeah.
And, I take Google Maps and I kind of shove her out the window a lot of times for people when they Google something.
Yep. Yep.
And,
Oh, no, I would tell somebody, if somebody calls in and says, hey, it's like I said, it's only 10 hours from this point to that point or whatever it may be. Or I say, well, it's only so many miles. Okay, if you want to pay for the whole trailer and you want to pay a significantly higher rate to go from exactly here to exactly there in a straight shot with only your animal on there, that's fine. It's going to cost you 2, 5, 10 times the money to move the animal. And that's the way we're able to get these routes done cost effectively. Or people ask me, how in the world do I include shipping in the sale price when I include that as a service for my clients? And it's because of your ability to coordinate routes. And that's the difference where I think, people don't have their head wrapped around, if it were just a straight shot, they'd be paying for the whole truck and the whole trailer. But if they can understand and I guess give a little grace or give a little wiggle for, hey, the way we're able to do this for you so cost effectively is because the trailer stays full. And I think that's one of the huge things you bring to the table, David, relative to just driving a truck or just providing a truck and trailer. You can fill the trailer.
Yes.
Because if I have to fill the trailer all day, every day, it's a whole nother job for me. I got to get the whole trailer full. I got to get the whole route coordinated. I got to figure out all those stops. Where can we sort? Where can we load? How can we feed? How can we water? How do we stay out of extreme weather? How do we keep drivers awake? How do we whatever? And that's a humongous job and a real weight you take off my shoulders. So when somebody calls and says, hey, I got to get an animal from point A to point B, is there anywhere you can't get them to other than Hawaii? I mean, have you been able to get them pretty well wherever within the U.S.?
There's nowhere I can't get them in the country. And I've hauled cattle up to Alaska a couple times or whatnot pre-COVID. And, you just, again, you work out the logistics, you work out your waypoints, and sometimes it takes a little longer. And it takes a lot of people. It takes people like yourself or other breeders around this country that I rely on to say, hey, I need to work on a time frame or I need to work on a schedule.
Right.
And if you can give me these grace, I'll give you a break or I'll give you a discount.
Right.
Because it does mean so much to me.
Sure.
Because if I have people that are willing to work with me, by gosh, I'll work with them every day of the week.
Right, absolutely.
And needless to say, I do have some folks that I've worked with that are a little more grudgingly unaccepting, and they can going down the road sometimes.
I've always said, sometimes it's important to cull cattle if you want a quality herd. It's important to cull clients if you want a quality set of those
That
two.
is an understatement, my friend. That is an understatement. But, no, it's, working logistics out on this stuff it can be tricky. And luckily I've got some guys that have worked for me and whatnot or worked with me. I always tell my guys that never work for me, they always work with me.
Yep.
And they've done really good.
Yeah.
They've done really good, and they've helped me out a lot of ways.
Right.
And they've been an asset in more times than I care to think about.
Right, absolutely.
Because if it wasn't for them, I couldn't do what I do.
Right, right. And if you were to put somebody else into my shoes, so quite often, I mean, we use you for a lot of shipping. We've sent cattle all over, everywhere. We've sent big loads, little loads, long loads, short loads, and you've been able to accommodate all of them.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody was new to it and they'd never sent cattle a large distance before, what kind of paperwork do they need to have ready? Or I guess I should put a couple things in there other than just paperwork. I mean, obviously the animal's got to be physically present and in a spot we can get them on a trailer ready to rock and roll. But what kind of paperwork do they need to have handy so those cattle can travel interstate without a problem?
Well, the biggest thing, first and foremost, is always a health cert. I mean, I require a health cert on every animal we haul.
Yep.
And depending on the country you're in, you may need a brand inspection.
Yep.
And people need to make sure they do their homework.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of folks out there that don't understand. Well, they may not have a brand inspection state.
Yep.
So they don't understand when they're shipping that animal, you still have to have it.
Yep.
Some states are actually zoned. So like California, for instance, is a zone state. There's some portions of it aren't brand inspections. Some are.
Yep.
Nebraska, Kansas are a list of them.
Yep.
And then trick testing.
Yep.
Trick testing is major when you come into bulls. And making sure you've done your homework and just to even ensure you bought the right animal or bought a healthy animal.
Sure.
I mean, as a breeder, you know, you've got to sell the best stuff you can. It's got to be the right kind.
Yeah.
And there's where a lot of folks are, a lot of other transporters, and I won't toot my own horn on this, but a lot of transporters, they don't care about that part. They just want them on their truck.
Yep.
And I'm not that guy.
Yep.
Like I want, my stuff has to be legit because I am very respectful of law enforcement. I'm very appreciative of my, brand inspectors and stuff like that. So they do want to pull me over, which they can do at any time, day or night.
Right.
They're not going to give me a hassle.
Right.
Because I do have my paperwork on it. But
Yep.
the health certificate is first and foremost,
Yep.
followed by your brand inspection and your tricks.
Yeah.
And then in certain states, and also they need to make sure they've talked to their vets for brucellosis or tuberculosis.
Sure. You bet.
Those are two things that,
Yep.
again, depending on the state we go to, they require them.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's important for people to understand too. Sometimes, and coming back around to kind of like the Google thing, like I think most of us have gotten pretty used to, well, I can pull up on Google and I can just drive beeline to wherever, because if all I'm doing is moving me, I put me in the vehicle, I pull up Google, and I am there in 10 hours or whatever it may be, whatever the distance is. But factoring in, the time for the stops, the time for the routes, but then talking about this paperwork end of it, even just to have the cattle ready, if you want to have the cattle ready and you want to have all the paperwork in line to where everything's, T's are crossed and I's are dotted, you need to give yourself enough time. If I'm the guy shipping, I got to say, okay, if the animal's sold and we're trying to get them from here to Texas, the East Coast, wherever it may be. I mean, we just had a series of deliveries, Texas, Georgia, South Carolina,
Tennessee,
Alabama.
Yep.
Alabama. So, I mean, send them all over the place.
Yes, sir.
And we got to have enough time to get those cattle gathered. And then I got to make sure I have enough time I can get a hold of a vet, because that's challenging. Vets are booked out tight. So I got to have enough time to get a hold of the vet. I got to have enough time to get a hold of the brand inspector. I got to get all that paperwork completed before they leave. And then once they leave, just like we've talked about, it isn't a dead ahead straight shot going to be there right away kind of a deal. There is a route that's going to be coordinated. So what if somebody has purchased an animal or sold an animal and is going to move it cross country, how much time do you think they need to give from the day, say it's bought in an auction or sold in an auction or whatever else, from that day clear through to the time that animals are delivered? How much time do you think a person needs to realistically give themselves so that they have time to gather, the vet has time to inspect, the brand has time to inspect, you or a driver has time to pick them up, and then you have time to run the complete route and get them there? What kind of a window do you think just to give themselves enough room they're not, I don't know. I think sometimes we think like, well, I bought it yesterday and you could drive here in a day, so why isn't it here tomorrow? You know what I mean? I'm like, it's not Amazon Prime.
No, we are definitely not Jeff Bezos. If we were, we probably wouldn't be doing this business. Or we'd be doing it in a more expansive way. No, a lot of people have to, I hate to say it quite like this, sometimes people have to quit being so, what's the word I'm looking for? I apologize. Kind of dependent on that immediate satisfaction.
Sure.
It takes 2 to 3 weeks to coordinate everything, and because if people stop and think, again, we can't hardly find vets these days.
Right. Yep.
You may be a week before you can get your vet out to even do a trick test. And it takes 7 days to get your trick test
back. Result back, exactly, from the day they test.
And a lot of buyers, and this is where, again, I ask my sellers sometimes to make sure your buyers understand, because, especially the Wagyu and the Akiushi, we have so many fresh faces coming into this breed. And I relish that. I really do. I'm so glad to see people getting in this animal, this aspect of breeding. But they need to realize that, there's certain things and certain protocols we have to follow.
Right.
So brand inspectors are harder to come by nowadays because they're retiring.
Yep.
these states are not replacing them as fast as they were. They're asking the brand inspectors to now work more districts,
Right.
which is hard.
Yep.
And of course, because those brand inspectors have to work with sale barns, other local ranchers that are doing, calf sales or other seed stock sales.
Right.
So yeah, you need to give yourself 2 to 3 weeks and just have that appreciation. So if you're going to schedule your fertilization or your collections or whatever,
Right.
make sure you put that in your mindset
For sure.
to where people know. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
okay, if I bought this cow May 1st,
Right.
I should expect him June 1st.
Right. Yep.
That's
Yep.
kind of what I'm looking for.
That's usually I tell people anticipate 30 days because
Mm-hmm.
I figure you're better off to expect 30 days and have it show up in 1 or 2 weeks or 3, because there are times that everything lines up just so, and it's slick and
Absolutely.
it's fast and it comes together really quickly. But it's a lot better to expect 30 days and get a week than it is to expect a week and get 30 days.
Well, that, and again, we go back to talking about sales, or even we get so much difference. Like if we have an online sale, or we have some of these ranch sales where a vet may be there, or certain paperwork was already done, trick testing was done, or something like that,
Yep.
and people don't realize that trick test is only good for 30 days.
Right. Right.
So
right, yep,
you got a week to take it,
Yep.
and then once you receive results, you have 30 days.
Yeah.
And whereas, say, an individual that's just selling a couple of cows here or there,
Yeah.
he plays a lot more harder of a time to get a vet, to get tricks, to
Right.
get whatever.
Right.
So where I want all my small guys to do well and grow,
Yeah.
when you're selling stock, you need to make sure your clients understand, hey, it's going to be 3 or 4 weeks possibly.
Right. Right.
By the time we've worked up transport,
Yeah.
testing, and everything else. And just that way, again, nobody's ever disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
And your buyers are never disappointed with you as a seller that you didn't have
Yes.
everything, all your ducks in a row.
Right. Right.
Because otherwise, you look like a fool.
Oh yeah.
And
Well, and I mean,
nobody wants that.
even from the day you load, so even say everything does go quick on all the paperwork and whatever
Mm-hmm.
else, from the day you load, we got to make sure all the way from here to there, whatever that route shapes up to look like, we got to make sure we got a driver that's sitting good, and we may use multiple drivers on a route,
Yes,
depending
sir.
on how that route
Yep.
comes together. You got to make sure drivers are good. We got to make sure trucks are good, which anyone who's ever owned a truck knows they're not good 100% of the time.
right.
There's going to be times that they'll go down or at a minimum need maintenance, and there's things that slow you down. You got to make sure your trailer's good. And there's times that, issues come up with the trailer or whatever else, and things like that aren't entirely within our control, and there's got to be a window allowed for that. Just some wiggle and
Well, again,
and
people
grace,
they need to have a little grace.
Yeah.
Probably the best word you could have said was they need to have a little bit of grace and understanding.
Yep.
That whether it be the buyer, the seller, the transporter, the
Yeah.
vets,
Right.
we're all doing everything we can.
Right.
We're all going to bust our tail to make sure you've got your animals safe and healthy,
Yep.
and probably the biggest thing is the healthy part.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
when
Absolutely.
our guys are rolling up to leave, like say we're leaving out of your place, like we did last week with a load.
Yep.
We had 6 separate states we had to cover,
Yep.
and we went from the south. And we're talking South Texas,
Yep.
all the way out to South Carolina and Georgia.
Yep. Yep.
It's not right around the corner,
Right. Right.
and those animals need hay, they need watered, and that's one thing, again, I direct my guys that if you're going over 20 hours, you're unloading.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to let those cattle off the truck. We look at sorting pairs off sometimes, depending on the size of my calves.
Yep. Yep.
Again, these cattle are my cattle.
Yeah.
And I treat them accordingly like that. And that's where I'm very proud of that part.
Right.
And my guys have the same appreciation. We've got a young man working for us, Zach, that is a good friend of yours. That he came to work for me, and he's been impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's really been impressive. He's been spot on. He's had a couple short mistakes, but when you go on the road for the first few times, you're going to have that.
Oh, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
by gosh,
Yep.
he's been stellar.
I say he stepped up to the plate.
Yeah.
I've been impressed.
Yeah, I've been very happy with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he handles cattle and he handles horses. And, again, this is when you're trying to find somebody in this business, that's a hard combination to find.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Somebody can drive and handle the rig and handle the stock.
Yes.
And is not afraid to make a phone call to a barn or something like
Right.
that if he's in there he doesn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm the first one to tell people, as much as I've been places, there are places I don't know where I'm at.
Sure. Yep.
So I'll
yep.
start Googling.
Oh yeah.
God
yeah.
bless, I'll Google.
Yeah. There is a time when we don't throw Google out.
That's
the window.
right. That's the only
There
time
is
for
a
me.
place for
that's,
it.
Yep, that's the only time for me. I will not throw her out the window.
There's a place for it. So walk me through this, David. Thinking through, like you just mentioned, you've been in and out of a fleet of different places, different clients, different breeders, sale barns, whatever it may be. What does a good loadout setup look like or sort setup? If you're rolling in or out of a place, whether it's my barn, a sale barn, or another client's, just so people kind of know. Ideally, in a perfect world, everyone would have a pretty decent setup to load out of, to receive in, to sort from, and that helps coordinate, your routes and things. Gives you guys some leeway and some options you wouldn't otherwise have. What are the best loadout setups you've seen, and what are the worst ones that you'd prefer to avoid? That maybe, if people kind of had a heads up on or had their head wrapped around, what does that need to look like as far as even just some basic pens or ways of doing so that you don't roll up and realize, we don't have any way of getting this animal on the trailer, and or we don't have any options to sort cattle around or reload or things like that.
You know, probably the first thing I would want is when I'm going on a gooseneck unload, specifically my gooseneck unloads, I'd want 2 solid posts for my corners.
Yeah,
back
a
up to a trailer.
couple posts would be
Rather
good.
than I put 2 panels up and we're going to tie them to your trailer. I've had that happen before a few times. And yeah, they don't normally work out well for us.
Yeah.
Because those cattle are typically, because those folks, with all due respect to those folks, they don't know a lot about the business.
Sure.
And they don't understand that it doesn't take much to have a cow get out. And once they're out, they're out. And, you know, you take your time and stuff like that, and you take all the time in your world, and sometimes it's still going to turn sideways. So probably first thing I want is a good solid. I like my unloads to be a trailer wide.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of the little calf slide or roll up door wides on a gooseneck, because if something goes bad, they're coming right back in your seat pockets,
exactly right.
and it's going to hurt.
Yep.
And you will be the casualty of something.
Yep.
Whereas if you have that gooseneck wide, you can swing your full door, and you can work them in.
Right.
Next thing at that point would be make sure you've got a block gate the distance back of your cut gate. So if you're
block gate, walk us through what you're talking about.
So a block gate is a gate that we use through a series of pins to shorten up the distances to where they can't come back on you.
Right.
So,
So you don't have the whole alley wide
That's
open.
right.
You're able to cut it down as you move.
I cut it down pretty. Especially when you get them to the trailer, because very few cattle just jump on a trailer and say, "Let's go for a ride, cowboy."
Right.
They are in building towards that.
Yep.
They just are. So if you can have a block gate or a series of block gates, one specifically where your full swing comes and your block gate sits right there at that end.
Yeah.
You can use that block gate and your swing gate to maneuver your cattle on a trailer and avoid probably 90% of the accidents that will ever happen.
Yep.
Just because you're safe in that corner.
Right.
You can use that cut gate to swing forward
Yep.
and swing your panel around the whole same time,
Yep.
and you're safe.
Yep.
Nobody's ever hurt.
Right.
Or 90% of the time you won't be.
A lot of problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it just makes a more functional setup. If you can have it, which not a lot of folks do or have thought about, but if you can build up a berm to where when you back up that gooseneck, it's the same height as the average, not every trailer.
Sure.
Because, my Wilson, my Elite, they sit 2 totally different heights because the Wilson's an air ride and Elite's not. But if you can build up a little berm to where, again, those cows don't have to jump, they can do more of a walk-on.
Right.
So much more functional, so much more safe.
Yep.
And same thing when you unload. Those cattle can walk off on something rather than jump. Any guy that's ever hauled cattle in a steel trailer, a gooseneck or an aluminum, whatever the trailer, they always slip. Cattle always slip when they're coming off.
Yep.
And, again, you risk injuries to your animals.
For sure.
So, you taking things like that for a few dollars or a few hours of work, those things go a long way in the safety of your animals.
Oh, absolutely.
And just in the overall handling of your animals.
Yeah.
And that to me makes a big difference, and again, this is where folks in this breed, talking to folks, teaching folks.
Oh yeah, that's what this podcast is for.
Yeah, because and that's what I've appreciated about it, watching it. I learned things about breed production that I never knew.
Sure. Yep. I learn every time I go through and ask people these questions that I've asked a million times before. It's educational for me too. Yeah.
And but that's where people got to share these ideas and share these thoughts, because it really does make a big difference.
Yeah.
We're in a breed between the Accouche and the Wagyu both where there's a lot of room for growth.
Yep.
And we bring a lot to the table with 2 separate breeds, whether you're doing seed stock or you're going to do F1 programs. And I'm a huge fan of it. Again, I really am. My wife and I are both into it now.
Yeah.
And God bless that woman. She just makes me shake my head
for a number of reasons. Bless Tina.
Yes, for a number of reasons.
What a great lady.
One, first of all, putting up with me.
Yeah, you bet.
But no, it's so, trying to get people more and more into this business and into this breed, educating folks to what the rights and the wrongs and the goods and the bads and the do's and the don'ts, a whole list of things. To me, the hauling aspect is probably one of the simplest yet hardest things to ever kind of have some folks understand. Because again, we go back to Google sometimes, and they don't have that conception. If it's 10 hours, I'm going to stop for fuel twice.
Right.
And if I hit traffic, and I can't speed, I can speed, but I try not to speed too much. And it makes it hard. But yet people sit there, well, you must be driving fast. No, I just like to drive.
Right.
I like to drive.
You drive at a rhythm I don't know I've ever seen anyone else do. I mean, you're incredible what you can cover for country. But I look at one thing, even looking at our loadout, coming back around to that end of it, we were never historically, prior to this particular facility, we were never covered and lit for our loadouts. It was always just, I mean, most loadouts I ever used never were covered and lit. And when we initially set stuff up here, it was just kind of how it happened. It wasn't necessarily by design or the plan, but the way it came together as we molded new ideas or new plans to existing infrastructure, we did end up with our loadout covered and lit. And now I could never go back because now we can load anytime, day or night. We can sort anytime, day or night. The cattle are secure. There's feed. There's water, and it's been a game changer for us. So that I mean, it's not a have to be covered and lit, but boy, it's been nice for us.
Especially in this climate.
Yeah,
when we're dealing with snows and wind and stuff like that in a winter, like you guys can sometimes get, or anywhere in the north. I am definitely pro cover.
Oh yeah.
So it does. Again, it makes it so much safer.
Makes a huge difference. Well, and if you have to stop off with somebody else's animals, if you're resting them here and getting feed and water,
which I've definitely done before,
they're not coming off and getting in the wind. They're not coming off getting in the snow, the wet, anything else. It doesn't matter if you need to come in late or leave early. It's covered, it's lit, and that's been worth a lot. But one thing I wanted to touch on too, even looking at the loadouts and or even just the people helping. We talked about how you've ended up hurting a little bit lately, and there's been some well-intentioned people that you ended up injured due to people trying to help, but maybe not knowing quite how to. What would you say to anybody that, hey, they're putting animals on your trailer for the first time, they've just met you, they're all excited about whatever, or they're helping you load, or they think they're helping you load. What would you say, things that are helpful versus things that, hey, this resulted in your knees banged up, your elbows banged up, your ribs broke, walk us through that. What's helpful and what's not for somebody
that's loading? First thing I would tell people, and I tell people this all the time, the slower you go, the faster you work.
Right.
So, when you're working cows, especially loading, because again, there's a lot of stress going on with them cows. Right. They get trotty, they get high-headed, they start looking for places to go. No, it's not on the trailer. So tell them to go slow. I advise people to keep their voices down, take their time, talk calm. Don't use hot shots. God bless people. Don't use a stupid hot shot. Use a rattle paddle. My favorite thing, probably for me personally, is a sorting flag. Love a sorting flag.
Sure.
Because you can put that in their face and they'll walk away from it. You don't have to pop them in the face or nothing else.
Right.
And those are things that are real handy and obviously great for any stockman to have on hand.
Say right there by your two solid posts, there probably ought to be something. There should be a sort flag, a rattle paddle, not a hot shot.
No, no hot shots. It's just because again, when you're
it doesn't help. It sure works them
up. It gets them hotter than a firecracker. And again, depending on the breed of cattle you're trying to load or move, it's not going to end well in the end because they never come back. Some cattle if they get hot shotted a couple times, they're never the same animal again. And a lot of folks don't understand that.
Right.
I've been around a lot of sale barn cattle, feeder cattle, and everything else in my life, and hot shots are the detriment or the risk of getting somebody killed quick.
Oh yeah, yep.
Because cows aren't supposed to be electrocuted.
Right.
But no, I tell people all the time to be slow.
Yep.
Stop, think, relax, don't yell, don't holler, don't fly your arms all over the place like a wild man.
Yep.
And take time. Just take the time. Make it a good experience. And I promise you one thing in the end, everybody's going to be happier. The cattle are going to be safer. They're going to be calmer on the end. It goes a long way.
So what ended up happening as far as you getting snagged? Just walk us through the basic scenario there. And it's not even near so much, I don't want anybody to feel at all, thrown under the bus in any way, shape, or form, because anyone could have done exactly what happened in those settings as far as they were intending to be helpful, but they did something they thought would help, and then you're hurt. So, just walk us right through that story, just because it's a good case study, because truthfully, every time it happens, not because someone's trying to cause a problem, but because they don't understand they are, it's putting you in danger again. And it's putting you in danger, it's putting the animals, the trips, the loads, the people receiving, me shipping, you know what I mean? Like, there's a whole fleet of reasons, above and beyond the fact that, you and I are darn good friends, but there's a fleet of reasons. It would be ideal if we didn't have you get hit again.
Yeah, I would be much appreciative of that. It's a lot. My life's a lot more progressive if I don't get hurt.
Right. What happened?
Well, the first version of that 5-week-long issue of mine was loading some heifers one morning in a single wide load out.
Yeah.
No block gates, no cut gates, no stop gates, no nothing.
Yep.
And we were loading some heifers up, and they were a little slow to load because there's not an open path. And the boys that were there decided to use a hot shot. And that heifer in the back, and for whatever reason, they decided to get the one in the back, not the ones in the front.
Yeah.
And I was right behind the one in the back.
Yeah.
And she jumped up and double barreled me.
Ugh.
6-weight Akiushi heifer, and my chest ain't never likely you're going to forget it. And
Ouch.
snapped a rib and sat there trying to gasp for air for about 5 minutes. And
You can smile telling that story. I'm
Oh,
over here
it's-
grimacing, you know.
I wasn't smiling at the moment. I was trying to catch my breath and pray to God I could still breathe after the fact was over.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
yeah.
ironically enough, that afternoon, I was in Missouri unloading the same heifers. Of course, they swing gate, and they all went running off the trailer, happy as a lark. And I was on my trailer, and I was loosening up some stock. Had cows and bulls and trying to give them a little more room. And old boy from the outside had a rattle paddle and decided he was going to make that bull move a little quicker. And when he did, that bull got scared, and the bull wasn't trying to even mean intentionally. That rattle paddle just scared the snot out of him, and he turned around and kicked.
Yep.
And I was standing on the front of my trailer letting him go by me. He kicked me right in the calf muscle,
Ugh.
knocked me to the deck of the trailer. And at that point in time, I thought I was going to retire for the day and for the rest of my life because it was a 9-hour day, and I already had one rib broke, and
Yeah.
the rest of the day was just miserable after that. I
Right.
just couldn't recover.
Ugh.
And but it's like anything else. You try to educate people, and sometimes you can, sometimes you can't.
Sure.
People get in such a rush for these things,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's nothing good about rushing when you're in the cow business.
Right.
Whether you're trying to haul or breed or anything else, you just can't rush it.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And no, it's one of them things. Though, like I said, both guys weren't trying to be intentional.
Right.
They
right,
just
right.
wanted to lend a hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes I'll tell a lot of people a lot of times, just stand back and let me do my job.
Yeah.
That's what I'm being paid for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll never sit there and say I'm a better stockman than most folks, but
You're a better
I'm
stockman
probably
than most
better
folks.
stockman than most folks.
I'll say it if you
Yeah,
want
so,
to say it.
just
I mean,
kind of.
I've watched you go expert mode on some trailer sorts, and thought, I'm just going to let David do this.
I get lots of practice. I do get lots of practice. I mean,
well-
I've covered. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention, when it comes to you being in the trailer specifically, because you are awfully capable at being able to move animals around inside a trailer. But I think it's important that people understand when you're in a setting like that, specifically in the trailer, whether you're loading, unloading, sorting, whatever it may be, if you are in the same very, very restricted space with very large animals, people need to not make them jump. They need to not come up and slap the side of the trailer. They need to not come walking by and holler. They need to not stick in a rattle paddle, poking in with a hot shot. Like, there's not a lot of space, and there's an awful lot of animal. And I mean, you're tough, but like, you're still human.
Oh yeah, and I proved my humanity the other day. Again, 2 wrecks in a day, and I was ready to retire.
Yeah,
I was ready to call the trailer quits and tell somebody to come get my load.
Right. I mean, yeah.
But
yeah.
but in due respect to that, I mean, it's the same factor that if somebody doesn't see it and they don't learn from it, they can't learn what they did.
Right.
I don't like to be the guinea pig for all their experiments. I will pass on that more if I can.
If we can share the story here, and this is one of the things that I have loved about the podcast, though, is that if we can share the story here one time, and then, even if it's just a couple hundred people that hear the story, right? That's a couple hundred times we don't have to tell the story over for people to understand, hey, you know what I shouldn't do the day that David's in the trailer and I come walking by? I probably shouldn't slap it. You know what I mean? I probably shouldn't
get excited.
I probably shouldn't work up cattle if they're, and the same would apply even just outside the trailer. I mean, if you're like in a load up type scenario, you're anywhere that they're pretty tight. If you or anyone else is in a tight space with an animal, we need to not make them panic. Plain and simple. Anyway, if one of the people listening understood that today and didn't understand it yesterday, that might be one less time, one less day that you have a hard time walking on your knee.
Yeah. And just for sake of their own kids or something.
Oh,
if they're not
absolutely.
thinking, if they're not
Absolutely.
paying attention, I mean,
Yeah.
again, this is a business where it doesn't take much to get hurt.
No, they're big animals.
And I don't care. They can weigh 200 pounds and they weigh 2,000 pounds. They can't kill you.
Oh yeah, yep. Can and will. We just had a neighbor. I mean, right here within just a couple miles of us, has dairied his whole life. Got killed by a bull the other day.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's not an inexperience issue there. You know what I mean? Very educated, very capable stockman, and things like that happen. And I think it's important that people kind of have the gravity of the scenario, just have their heads wrapped around. And again, we come back around to even just having a little grace for the job you're doing. You know what I mean? So that I don't ever want people to call and get after you or me or anybody and say, oh man, like this and that's got to happen on this super ridiculous timeline. Say, listen guys, like literally in some life-threatening scenarios here to handle animals that big in that tight of space, even if everything's being done just so, you're taking on some risk for people. You know what I mean? You're providing a significant value and a real service. And I think it's just important if people can understand what you're doing, they can appreciate what you're doing, and give you that grace. So coming around to communication, and communication throughout the route, whether that's between me and you, between me as a shipper and you as managing transport, and or for somebody that's buying and is communicating with you. Walk us through communication, why it matters, and how much is too much, how much is too little, what. Walk us through communication.
I'm pretty good with my folks, or I try to be. I try to make sure everybody kind of knows, hey, this, we got, like specifically, okay, so a lot of our clients for this trip, you and or I both reached out to buyers and let them know, hey, we got all your cattle loaded.
Yep.
They'll be, indirectly, throughout, and your driver will be in contact with you the next day or so.
Yep.
I like my drivers and myself to contact my clients at least once a day.
Yep.
Just to give them a rough idea of like, hey, it's gonna be 2 or 3 days from now, or hey, we'll see you tomorrow.
Right.
Depending on where we're going.
Yep.
And just kind of give an update on how the cattle are watered, how they, rested up,
Yep.
how they're, just how they're taking the trip. Yep. I'm huge about, I'm real big about telling somebody about the discipline, the docility of their cattle.
Sure.
Like their cattle are hot.
Yep.
I'm gonna let you know, hey, when you get this animal, be a little watchy.
Right.
Because he will smoke you in the pants or something like
Right,
that, or
right.
because we have had people that have sold quote unquote quiet animals, and they'll eat your back pocket.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's one thing I want my buyers to know is that, like, listen, this is what you're picking up.
Right.
If there's an issue, I can say without a doubt, your cattle have been by far the quietest cattle we've ever hauled.
Appreciate that.
They go a long way.
And we make it a point to make them that
Yep.
way. We were just in the pen with
Well, I
them.
was going to say, we just spent an
what I mean?
hour outside
Yeah.
looking at heifers, including
Yep.
one I bought from you.
Yeah. Yep.
And just as quiet as cucumbers.
Yep.
And that's the way it should be in this business.
Yep.
That this is the thing that every breeder should strive for. Is raising the quiet cattle, because that's, quiet cattle make pounds.
Oh yeah.
Hot cattle don't make no pounds.
Yeah.
I used to tell people that worked for me a long time ago, if a calf runs 50 yards, it goes $50.
Yeah.
It takes 50 days to make $50 back. Cents don't make dollars.
Right. Yep.
And, again, it's, so as far as when I'm communicating to my clients, I let them know how their animals do. I let them how they've traveled, really. And that's my biggest thing hauling cows.
Right.
Thankfully, most of my horse people aren't like my cow people.
It's
Horse people, they need their hands held. They need their hands held. They need to know how Muffy's doing, if she ate and drank, if she crapped, how many times she was. How many turds did she have in it? And, but my cow people, I just like to let them know they've eaten and they've drank and done their jobs, and really kind of the animals you're getting.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's important. If communication is happening, I've talked about this a lot. If people know what's going on, whatever it is, most people are pretty good. You know what I mean? And,
absolutely.
And that's where I think it's important. I probably err on the side of over communication at times, but truthfully, I think people would rather know or rather have a heads up on whatever it is.
Yes.
Whether that's timeline, whether that's how the animals are doing, whether that's what to expect when they arrive, whatever it may be. The more people know, the less likely they are. People, myself included, tend to be probably most disconcerted by the unknown. Like what's going to go on here. And I was just thinking about that, and this happens every time I record a podcast. There's always a thought that comes to mind. I'm like, I didn't put it in the outline or whatever else. But one of the things I thought when it comes to communication, and I was just talking to Zach about this today, and I try to communicate with the people that buy from us here, and especially if those cattle are going cross country. So like we just sent a bunch of cattle to the southeast coming here from Idaho, and helping people understand it. And people are generally pretty darn good to have their heads wrapped around it. But if they don't, just tell them, hey, look, the day that animal arrives, if it's left Idaho and come all the way to South Carolina, for example, even if everything is done perfectly, they have still traveled thousands of miles.
Yes.
They've come a long ways. Those cattle, the day they come off the trailer, frankly, is probably the day that they will look the worst and act the worst of the time you're going to have them.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Without
like
doubt.
once they get settled in and they get to where they filled back up on feed, they filled back up on water, they've rested up, they've kind of blended into the herd. They're gonna look different and they're gonna act different versus
Absolutely.
right when they arrive, even if everything's been done spot on, they've still gone a long ways. You know what I mean? And that's the time they are most likely to act up, to be a little wound up, is the day they're coming off the trailer.
right.
The time they are most likely to look a little gannered up or look a little thin or look a little empty is the day they arrive. But after, you give them a minute, let them settle in, and ideally, if they can arrive, walk us through an ideal receiving scenario versus one that would make that animal continue to be wound up or look empty or look in or whatever else. I'm just thinking, if an animal arrives and is blended right into a good set of cattle with plenty of feed and plenty of water, they're going to settle in within a day or two.
Well,
they get penned on their own with no feed, no water. They're not going to get any better. They're going to get worse.
Well, and that's always my advice to any of our buyers or any buyer or any of the buyers that we have around this country, that put them off into a pen. if you can, put them with, especially if you're buying some heifers or something, or put them with some other heifers.
Yeah. Yep.
Where you got fresh hay, you got fresh, grass, water, whatever you're feeding.
Yep.
Throw some corn in there. Don't be afraid to throw a little grain. God bless. You spent $10,000 on a cow. Don't cheapen out on a $10 bag of corn. Because again, that's something that cow knows.
Sure.
That's something that cow will instantly go to and start, and any animal, when they're nervous, I don't care. People do the same thing. When they get nervous, they get Loctite. So I call it lockjaw, and it's exactly what it is. They'll be tense, they'll be tight.
Yeah.
But if you can get them out to start chewing, make a cow start chewing,
Yeah.
they instantly start to relax.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so by going to their water trough, by going to a feed bunk,
Yeah.
they'll instantly start to settle in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always advise my people to put them in. If you got other cows, put them in there with some other cows.
Right. Right.
Or if you don't have any other cows and these are your first cows, get some music, just something that's going to be soothing.
Something to settle them.
Yeah, and sit there and talk to them.
Yep.
Just in a soft fashion. Again, there's no on cowboy stuff.
Sure.
This is being a cattleman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a whole big difference between being a cowboy and being a cattleman.
Yep.
And that is the biggest thing. As far as the receiving cows, that's probably the biggest thing I'd ever advise.
Right. Right.
Just make sure they got hay and water in front of their face. Because no matter how many times we could stop for 10 hours in a night.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And have hay and water right in front of their face.
Yep.
They're going to spend the first 2 hours walking around.
Right. Right. Right.
They're going to, just like any cow does, which
Yep.
Yep. They will walk their pens, they'll walk their pastures, just see what the perimeter is like.
Right. Right. Right.
And then
But you better have a good perimeter on.
You
If
sure wanna
somebody's
put it.
receiving cattle for the first time, those are the most common pitfalls I see when somebody's receiving. Would be one, if they receive right into a pen that's not at all secure. Like you want something fairly stout, fairly solid to receive in. Number two, if they receive them alone, so they got nothing else to blend into or to calm them down or to get used to. Or number three, they hold them off feed and water. You want to, if they can come right on to feed and water in a secure space with other animals, they do great. But and I should say the very worst case is even if it is a real mellow animal that's left, but that animal's kind of wound up or worked up from being on the trailer, you don't want to say, hey, the time I'm going to test, will this animal let me pet it? The time to test that probably isn't the day they're coming off the trailer.
No.
You know what I mean? When they're way worked up, I wouldn't say, hey, this is a brand new animal I don't know in a place it doesn't know, and I'm going to hop in here with it and go right to trying to pet it. You might be asking to get smoked.
Oh yeah. Well, and that being said, like you said, and there's another key point. So when you're going to take cows that have been on a trailer with other cattle, and just like use our cattle for instance, coming out of here, these cattle have all been together half their lives. They know each other. They're quiet. They're settled. They're gentle. Again, and one of the reasons I can jump in this trailer and sort cattle off on a trailer.
Right.
You go to a new place. You take this cow. Say you take this one of these heifers and put her off by herself.
Yeah.
Now she's nervous
Uh-huh.
because you just put her by herself.
Yeah.
So again, if you put her in a pen by herself and she has no hay or no water, no feed,
Right.
she's going to continue to get nervous.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And you aren't going to give her a fair assessment.
Right.
Because it's not fair to her at that point.
Right. Yep.
So again, having feed and hay and water, whatever, all of it really, in front of the face. And ideally, if somebody could do it, it's not the easiest thing. Have a good set of pens or have a small, I don't care if you have a 14 by 14 pen to put her off into. Just so she's got someplace stop, short.
Sure.
She can't run too far to jump.
Yep.
And she's got enough to walk around and kind of mellow out and lay down.
Yeah.
Because again, we go back to laying over, and I can lay over 6, 8, 10 hours in a night. Cattle are going to spend half the night walking around,
Yep.
trying to figure out what's going on, where the new environment's at now.
Right.
And then they might spend a couple hours eating and drinking,
Yeah. Yep.
and then they're going to lay down
Right.
because they won't lay down on a trailer when it's moving.
Yep.
And if they do lay down on a trailer, they're exhausted. And that's something, again, I try to avoid that part as much as I can.
Yeah. Right.
Because you don't ever want your cattle too overly exhausted when you're hauling.
For sure.
So again, there's a lot of logistics going back into that again, but figuring out a good stopping point.
So we've kind of talked through getting cattle on the trailer, or I should say we've talked about preparing cattle to go. We've talked about getting them on the trailer. We've talked about communication while they're in or out. Walk us through timelines. I mean, again, and I should say timeline from the day they load out here in Idaho to the day they arrive wherever they may be going. And we've talked about that is going to be different. There is going to be sometimes that's really, really fast. There's going to be sometimes that's really, really slow. What's reasonable to expect as far as, I mean, obviously there's a finite number of miles or hours you can do in a day. And or there's typically multiple stops along the route that are going to pull you off the direct line from here to the East Coast, for example. What's a reasonable expectation? If I let somebody know, hey, so-and-so, I have just put this animal on a trailer in Idaho, and I say, okay, I'm sitting on the East Coast ready to receive. What's a reasonable expectation? Just so people have their head wrapped
A
around
good
it.
idea for coming out of Idaho, especially right here where we're at on the western slope of the Rockies. A good, going to the East Coast, we'll use South Carolina, Virginia as an example.
Yep.
You're looking at a good 4 days probably by the time you stopped and dropped and unloaded and reloaded. And because again, to be fair with logistics, and I have to add cows with the truck. I have to have other pickups and other drops.
Yeah.
And sometimes I add horses to my routes.
Sure.
And a lot of my clients are like, "Well, that's just awkward." Yeah, but it works.
Uh-huh.
And I can keep that price cheaper to you.
That's right. That's right. I'd much rather have a horse on the trailer, footing their bill of the trailer, than say, I don't want any horses, but I'm going to pay for the whole trailer.
That's right. Yep. And that's exactly it. I look at the economics for everybody.
And you have them cut. I mean, they're split.
No, I never put anything together like that.
Right. So,
We seldom ever even commingle cattle.
Right.
If I can, I try to keep my cattle separated from everybody else's.
Right.
Just because I don't know what your program was. I don't, parasites and all these other health issues we deal with.
Sure.
I don't like that cross contamination.
Yep.
Sometimes I don't have a choice. Depending on selling coming from, I may not have a choice.
Yep.
But I'm lucky enough when I come ranch direct.
Yeah.
I know exactly where that animal's been.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, anywhere, I can be anywhere from here, say Idaho here in Idaho, or really anywhere across the country in 6 days.
Yeah.
I can go from California to Virginia in 6 days.
Yeah.
And that's been probably gracious by a couple of days, but
Sure.
still getting the job done, make sure my animals are always healthy.
Right. Well, and I figure it's always better if you say, hey, I'm expecting 6 days and get there in 4.
Exactly.
Versus say, well, I was expecting 4 and it takes 6.
Hi, sweetheart. I've just been really busy all day at work, and I totally forgot what was on my honey-do list. Can you just tell me, please?
I would love to remind you.
Thanks.
Number 1, get on the website, gotanycows.com.
Gotanycows.com.
Number 2, subscribe. Number 3, early access, early bids. Get those bids in early for VIP access.
I can do that.
Number 4, and the final thing, remember this one, May 7th.
May 7th
It closes.
closes.
Get me the best cow.
Buy you the best cow.
The best cow.
I can buy the best cow.
Okay.
I will do that.
Great.
So we are back recording again for the Got Any Cows podcast. Here's my good buddy David Tanner of Rough Ride Cattle Services. And we've been talking about trucking cattle and getting them across the country, and just coming back from a little break ourselves, to get our hay and water, get a feed stop, a little bit of rest, So what does a feed stop look like for you? I mean, like when you're stopping and resting the cattle, one, I guess, how do you even find a place to stop? But two, what does that typically look like?
Well, normally, again, I'm very fortunate. I've gained a lot of contacts in this business. Folks like yourself and whatnot that I have for homes, ranches, sale barns, feed yards, whatever I can use.
Yeah.
Fairgrounds, anything.
Yep.
To where I always carry hay. I always carry hay with me, so I've always got hay available.
Yeah.
And we unload. I try to sort off everything accordingly. I always keep my bulls separate as much as I can.
Yep.
Keep my heifers separated from bulls because people are not very kind to the fact that you might show up with a bred heifer that you bought open.
Yep.
There's a discrepancy about that sometimes.
See, people seem to be prejudiced against
Yeah, it's something about
seems
the reds
to matter.
and the blacks and the whites.
All of a sudden, it
grays.
matters if they're male or female. But anyway,
Yeah,
I was like,
it's weird. But no, we try to sort off everything accordingly, make sure they got as much hay and water available. My biggest thing is safety of the pens.
Yeah.
Honestly, wherever I go, I got to know they're safe.
right.
Because you don't dare take a 2-year-old virgin bull and really don't even want to pen next to a set of heifers because he's going to lose his mind.
Yep.
Pens may not look the same next one.
Right.
And so I always want to make sure I got plenty of safe pens, plenty of pen space.
Right.
Honestly, that's probably the simplest thing I deal with, as far as this.
Is stopping to water and feed and
the biggest thing is other than the logistics, it's the service of my equipment that worries me next.
Yeah.
That's probably my biggest concern is keeping trucks and trailers sound.
Yeah. What are your most common points that'll fail on a truck or a trailer as far as things you're trying to prevent this common issue? What's your common things you run into?
Filters, first and foremost, on my trucks.
Yeah.
My trucks get serviced every week.
Yep.
Air, oil, fuel filters across the board. And there's a lot of folks, oh, you're doing too much. Well, I'm also not breaking down all the time, so that makes a big difference for me.
Yeah.
And then on my trailers is my bearings.
Yeah.
My bearings and my brakes.
Right.
To me, it costs a few $100 to pack a set of bearings once a month or once every couple months.
Yeah.
And when I say for me once a month, I mean you're talking 20,000 to 30,000 miles.
Right.
So that that ounce of prevention, what is it? The ounce of prevention.
Ounce prevention's worth a pound of cure.
That's it, my friend, right there.
Yeah.
And it goes a long way. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a lot of issues going down the highway.
Right.
Because that is the one thing that always bothers me or scares me if I'm broken down somewhere and I may not know somebody.
Yeah.
Especially depending on the time of year.
Right.
I mean, I can't forget I broke down one time in a blizzard up in North Montana, right there at the Montana-North Dakota border.
Yeah.
It was a blizzard.
Uh-huh.
Lost transmission.
Oh,
Just a brass
no.
fitting. It was just a brass fitting on the transmission.
Oh.
Set me in the middle of the highway. And it's over Thanksgiving time.
Oh.
And I
of course
mean,
it
was,
is.
Yeah,
that's
it
how
was one of
goes.
those things, and I didn't know anybody in that area. And so I call 911. And I will. I'm the first one to tell anybody, and I'll tell anybody this advice. If you ever break down and you don't know where you're at, just call 911. Immediately tell them it's not an emergency situation, but you broke down, you got livestock, whatever it may be.
Right.
And I promise you law enforcement will come running
Yeah.
and never give you a problem.
Yep.
And them boys and girls,
Yeah.
they will break their backs to make sure they take care of you.
That's awesome.
And that was one thing them boys up there did for me. They came right to me.
Yep.
They found me a ranch up the road. We drove my truck and trailer up to the ranch using a state vehicle, which we will not talk about that too much. But they pulled me with the state vehicle and took me to the ranch.
Yeah.
And then I got a tow truck to come to the ranch and pick up the truck.
Cool.
And that's but like I said, that's my biggest fear is breaking down.
Yeah.
Having equipment that's not right. The
Right.
feed and stuff on my animals, that's always pretty simple because I try to always feed alfalfa hay and cows are going to turn alfalfa hay down.
No.
They think that's crack, so that's cool.
Yeah.
And then making sure, of course, they've got water on site, but
Sure.
that's always pretty easy for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as the layovers and stuff, I'm pretty lucky there. I've got a lot of friends like you and stuff that I can call up at a moment's notice. Be like, hey, I got 6 head. I'm coming in hot.
Whatever you need, you
Yeah,
let
exactly.
me know. Day or
And
night,
they're taken
it's
care of.
yours. Yep.
And then, like I said, I got to worry about my rigs.
Yeah.
So-
Yep. No, that makes sense. So when it gets to delivery time, I mean, you've got these stock loaded, you've hauled them across the U.S., you've made the stops you need to. It's coming up on delivery time. What should people expect? What does what does that process end up looking like when somebody's about time and they've never received from you before, haven't dealt with you before, haven't trucked cattle across the country before? Maybe they're nervous or it's new to them. What do they expect as far as just what does the whole process look like?
So for me, it's going back to communication again.
Yeah,
I call them way ahead of time. I let them know, ETAs and routes and stuff, and I try to make sure they got a big enough area for me to turn my rig around.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
know,
Mention that. How much space do they need? And how long are you most of the time?
Well, my trucks and trailers combined are 53 foot.
Yep.
And that's on a short trailer, and my short trailer is 32 footers.
Yep.
So we require a pretty good sized space
Yeah.
to get turned around, especially if our loads are heavy, because if you're too tight on a rig, you're going to tear something up.
Yep.
But making sure I got plenty of area to get into and back up, and again, something that's safe to even unload.
Yep.
Because again, you don't want to issue where you unload it. And we've had this happen a few times. You unload a cow or a bull, and they're gone.
Yeah.
They're taking
They're gonna
fences
take
or whatever
off
out because
and-
of history.
Right. Right.
And one of our favorite people, he's notorious for sending cattle on the highway like that. That when you open a gate, they're history. He lives in Oklahoma. I'm leave it alone with that. It's just the way it goes sometimes.
the way
They get
it
hotter than firecrackers. And I just had to. It's just, again, stockmanship goes a long way.
Yeah.
And but I make sure I communicate with my customers, let them know where we're at,
Let them
where
know
we're
what to
sitting.
expect. Yeah.
And that I'll be right there to help them unload and get the cattle settled.
Yep.
And normally when I unload my stock, I'm always there for a few minutes anyways. I want to visit with the clients, let them know how the animals did.
Yep.
Just kind of visit with them, let them know what they're getting into as far as the breed and the husbandry of what they're dealing with, and make sure how they were with the experience.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if they have more, if they need more information, then call you or call myself or call other breeders that we've got.
Yep.
The people that we like or trust, and they're
Yeah.
trying to
Yep.
help other folks.
Right.
Again, we go back to the fact that a lot of these people in these breeds, I say a lot, I apologize. There's several folks in this breed, they don't even try to help buyers.
Sure.
They sell the animal and they just back out and they're gone.
Yep.
And again, it goes back to have folks like you that, just make sure that communication always stays in contact.
You bet.
Reaching out and answering any questions. Tina, my wife, has been notorious with you about that, asking 10,000 questions in a 5-minute span.
Happy to help.
And you've never not answered the questions. And that's what makes folks want to get in this breed more.
Right.
And then, so when we get there and make sure the cattle are settled and everything else, and then we start, people worry about money. And I
Sure,
tell people all the time, the last thing I ever worry to do is worry about being paid.
Right.
I'll get paid, but, it's the last
Yeah.
thing on my mind. And, we take payment and Venmo and checks and everything else, and I really don't care.
Yeah.
And I've had clients mail me checks, and shoot, I got a check in the mail the other day for a bull that I hauled. I forgot I hauled him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure enough, I got a check.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad they were good about it, because I didn't.
right,
I'd forgotten all about it.
Right.
But that's the one thing about it. It's just it's loving what we do, and making sure that folks have an understanding. This is a good time.
Right.
This should be fun.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I would never sit there and I would never call it a game, but life should be fun, and being in the business is fun.
You deal with the right people and it is. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? You deal with the right
Absolutely.
people and it is good. It is fun. It is a positive experience. Even if things do go poorly, or you know what I mean, you hit a snag or something's not quite right. If you're dealing with the right people, you got the right people around you, it is fun, you know.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I've seen. I mean, dealing with you and having you get cattle hauled all over, and the drivers you work with, and helping us coordinate everything with clients. It's a huge weight off my shoulders because I know you'll take care of it. I know you'll make it happen. I know you'll figure it out. I don't have to worry about it. Like I don't have to worry about like, so where are they going to stop, or what else do we need to add to the route to make it cost effective, or who do we need to communicate with? When do we need to service the truck? You know, I mean, how do we need to sort them around so they're coming off the right time in the right order, whatever else. You handle it, and it does. It makes it a positive experience for me as a seller, you know. And one thing you mentioned on jumping back a little bit to the length of trailer, and it just sparked again just a thought in my mind. Just remembering talking to people in several cases, we ship with stock trailers, so they're going to be ground load. You know what I mean? So people are getting on and off stock trailer. You know, a couple different things I would mention there. One is that people do need to have enough room to turn around, and I think it's important when people are designing, you know, where am I going to stick my pens? Where am I going to stick my barn? How does it all work? Like, walk us through some without mentioning names, walk us through some poor designs you may have run into, or just tighter spaces. You know what I mean? What kind of scenarios have you been in that make it more difficult than it needs to be to get the animals dropped off?
We've got a couple of folks in this business that I literally have to back up their driveway a half mile to get to a pasture, not even the pens.
Right.
So, you know, there's things like that, again, be it they're new or they don't want to spend the money or whatever the circumstances are sometimes, you know, those are things that inhibit you from wanting to haul for that person again.
Sure.
You know, not having the right setup. And I'm all about economics, and I get the pocketbook can get tight.
Yep.
But, you know, making your business grow is by making everybody happy.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got some outfits where, again, you have to back up a long way.
Right.
Or you may have to back up out of their driveway once you pulled in.
Right.
Those are fun times.
Right. Well,
And
it's one of those things I mentioned, not so much because, you know, I want to throw anybody under the bus, but because I don't think anybody has ever really intentionally made it too tight a space. I think the whole pile of people have unintentionally, you know, like they realize after the fact, like, oh yeah, they're going to load in and out of here. Like, well, yeah, but where are you going to turn around? Like, you know, and it just hasn't been thought through. So even if it's only one person one time, hey, maybe they haven't put in their loadout, or they're about to build a new barn or set of pens or whatever, we say, hey, give that truck and trailer plenty of room to turn. Like, if you couldn't pull in and turn around comfortably in a semi, I mean, now granted, that's not necessarily necessary, but it's sure better. Sure nice if they've got that amount of room to turn around.
Much more beneficial to think ahead and think in that scenario of a big 18-wheeler.
Right.
You know, an 18-wheeler combined is like 68 foot between tractor and trailer.
Yep.
If you can turn a 68-footer around and not destroy your place, think in that terms.
Yeah, right.
Because a 32-footer, 36-footer, which that's really as successful as we're ever going to get.
Yeah.
You know, we can turn around there pretty handy, not tear your place apart.
Right.
You know, because that's one thing about it. Again, I'm very, you know, aware of not trying to, you know, disrespect people's places by tearing things up.
Yep.
So, you know, if you have built your place so tight or haven't thought enough out to build it out, do that.
Yeah, right.
Save yourself the headaches and the ass chewings and everything else that may come along the line every once in a while.
Well, and I would recommend to people, I mean, if you get to a certain scale too, it's important to have somewhere a semi can load and unload. So just for people that wouldn't be familiar, walk us through what it takes to be able to load and unload a semi versus the stock trailers that we're typically delivering.
Oh, semis are a lot more logistical because you need a high dock first and foremost, or you need to get access to a high dock ramp, which not a lot of folks have those.
Right.
So you have to have access to the high dock. And pot drivers, they're a different breed. I think I'm different. They are different than I am by far. They live in their trucks. I mean, you will see tractor trailers running on the highway that cost $500,000.
Yeah.
Because those boys take a great deal of pride in their rigs.
Right.
And that's what they've called home for however long. So when you're loading a pot, you need plenty of room to back up. You need plenty of room to make sure that truck can get in there, get turned around.
Get straight on the loadout. Yeah.
Because, I mean, off a loadout, you need at least 100 feet.
Yeah.
So that tractor can pull forward and straighten up. Because the last thing he wants to do is turn too tight. Because there's two things going to happen. He's going to hurt his rig, or he's going to hurt your place.
Yep.
Or he may not even load.
Right.
Or you may not be able to get loaded out because you don't have enough room.
Well, and it's, I think, the worst case scenario, and I've heard of this happening before, if people don't, now I guess I'm gonna mention two things here.
Yeah.
One, when we send cattle, people don't have to worry about having a semi load or unload out.
Yeah, not right now.
But if somebody else did send cattle, I've had times here, and we're lucky we're set up. We do have a semi-receiving ramp ready at all times. But if we hadn't, we've had times where cattle have showed up being delivered. We didn't realize they were on a semi. It wasn't communicated that they're on a semi versus a ground load. And if an animal showed up to be delivered and it's on a semi, it isn't gonna. I mean, it's 4 feet off the ground.
Yes,
It's
sir.
4, if not 5, where your loadout's sitting, and they're not gonna just jump out the back of a semi onto your place. Like, you have got to have a way to get them on
Yeah.
and get them off. So.
Yeah, I can say, we have unloaded from the side of pots. the
Yeah,
side
take
doors.
them down, load down.
You
to
can
the pot.
do that
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
drop the airbags, but you also run the risk of injuries.
Sure.
And you're absolutely right. They're 46 inches from the deck to the on an unload on a high dock.
Yep.
And you have a cow jump out of there, she's breaking a leg.
Yep,
It's just
yep.
that easy.
Right.
And coming out the side is not much better because there's a lip when they come out the side doors.
Right.
So again, it's just not a safe practice.
Right.
So anybody that's going to do it, spend the time, spend the money, spend the energy.
Yeah.
Reach out to somebody like myself or other folks. Even there's plenty of other transports out there to reach out to and say, hey, what do you think I should have for my place? Or
Right.
again,
Right.
I'll be braggart enough to say call me because I can describe you the best thing you're ever going to need and probably the cheapest thing you're going to need.
Sure. Yeah.
The most economical at least.
Right.
And Lord knows I'm always available to answer questions about hauling because it's something I thoroughly love doing.
Right.
It's been a lot of fun and I love delivering cattle to people.
Yeah.
I love watching people get in this business.
Oh yeah, and you're good at what you do, and that's,
I like it.
I am happy to send cattle with you because I know they're going to show up. I know that I'm not going to have somebody call me and say, hey, I'm not going to name any names, but there are trucking options out there where cattle just go MIA for 3 weeks, and I don't know where they are, and the buyer doesn't know where they are, and no one's answering the phone on the trucks. Like you may say like, oh yeah, we're going to send them with trucking company XYZ, but backing up to that communication deal, it's a big deal just to know where they're at and to know who's driving them and to know when they're going to arrive. Because I've had scenarios where we've sent cattle and they're just gone for like 3 weeks, and then when they show up, they're 3-4 hours from the delivery point, and it's 2 a.m. on a Sunday, and they say, hey, you got to get them out of here. We're going to start billing you a feed. And you say, what? But that happened. I'm not exaggerating that scenario.
That particular outfit, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
I'm going to be respectful of that.
Yeah.
They've got a great reputation as far as moving numbers.
Sure, and they do
can
move a lot of volume.
cattle
Yep.
for a very
And
a much cheaper
they're
price.
people. Yeah, it's no disrespect to them because I have used them and they've been a viable option. But I'm sure grateful that we're able to do what we do now and get them right to the ranch gate with good communication instead of to a drop point somewhere else and not know when or where.
I'm a huge fan of Ranch Direct. I'm a huge fan of doing door to door.
Yep.
It's very seldom I ever want somebody to meet me in town.
Right.
Now if you live on a windy road, I may ask you to meet me in town. We'll bump trailers. I'm notorious for bumping trailers.
Sure.
But I love the idea of meeting the clients and letting them know what they got and what's going on in the trailer.
Right.
But it's to have these cattle, and people need to understand too, when you're hauling these cattle, if you hold them over for multiple days, the viruses, the illnesses, the dehydration, everything that can occur. Not saying it will. I'm never going to sit there and say it will. But you run a lot more chances of getting an animal sick.
Yeah.
Or having an abortion.
Yep.
Or something like that.
Sure.
That you don't need.
Yep.
And that's one thing about it. Whenever somebody makes their references to hauling, whether they use me or not, always do your homework and always make sure the animal's going to be there in a effective manner. And they're going to be treated accordingly because, again, you take 4 or 5 bulls from different ranches and some hauler throws them all in together.
Blend them all together into a confined
Something's
space.
going to happen.
There's going to be a leg snapped. You're going to be lucky if it's just a leg snapped.
Yeah.
You
can get contortions of penis.
They'll kill one.
Oh, yeah.
They'll kill one.
Really
If you get 4 bulls that know each other and one that doesn't, they'll kill them.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
it's a bad bulldog tactic. And, again, this is one of those things. And even cows.
Yep.
I've watched cows bully on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things. So, no matter what, always do your homework and just make sure you're going to get your cattle in respected time.
Right.
Because we're not spending a couple dollars on these cows.
Right. Well, I say,
Even on the commercial side these days, these cows ain't cheap.
They're worth a lot.
Yep.
They're worth a lot. So if the cattle get all the way to you, they've run the whole way, they've done the whole deal. You talk about them arriving, and you mentioned payment and some different payment options you can receive and things. Walk us through. A range of possible values depending on what someone needs, how far they go, and and how many they're sending and things like that, just so people have an idea. Here's a ballpark set of numbers. You know what I mean? If they were to call you up and say, hey, David, I got one that's got to go this distance versus I got 10 that have got to go a shorter distance. Or, you know, give us an idea, range of prices, and then who pays and how should they pay when it comes to getting you taken care of, and walk us through that. Because I know you do it different depending on
when I'm
who you're
looking at
working
freight
for.
costs.
Yeah.
You know, again, I mentioned earlier, I look at the fact that I want to be able to haul that animal for what it's going to cost you to drive back and forth on a single animal or two.
Yep.
And that's where I kind of base my cheapest price anymore is about $500 for one cow.
Right.
That's the cheapest.
Yep.
And it can go up to about, I think the most I've ever charged for one single animal has been $1,500.
Sure.
And that's an animal based across the country.
Right. Yep.
And then once you get 2 or 3 head, I start breaking it down per mile or per box. It can be as high as $4 for the whole load.
Yep.
Or, you know, if we're running 10 head, well, I've got a load leaving next week, or week after next. Got to go from Texas to South Dakota. And, I mean, I charge him per head.
Yeah.
But I still did it to a point where economically he was still sitting in and he's got a half a trailer load.
Yep.
And he's still sitting at like $2 a mile.
Yeah.
So I try to break it down to where a person can sit there and say, okay, because if somebody reads out $4 a mile and they've got 10 head and they're going 1,000 miles, they're going to freak out.
Right.
But I can take those same 10 head and charge you $500, which is going to be $2,000.
Right.
You're a lot more accepting of the fact, okay, he's still making a living. I'm not being murdered or taken advantage of.
Sure. Yep.
Because that is one thing that a lot of haulers want to just charge you by a mile per head.
Sure.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And they're just going to charge you per mile.
Yep.
There was a sale here recently. They had a sale, and the sale owner's like, oh, it's $2 a mile.
Yep.
So may as well fill your trailer. They charge that to every client they had.
Yep.
And
Yep.
again, I'm not that person. I don't want to do people wrong.
Right.
Or take advantage of them. You know, this is a hard business. So, you know, that's how I break the pricing down. So, I mean, it can be anywhere from $500 to $1,500 for one cow.
Sure.
It really kind of depends on where you're going. Again, is it a route that I travel frequently or one of the guys do?
Right.
Then we're going to be a little cheaper, a little more cost effective. And if you're willing to work with me on my timing,
Yep.
you know, if you've got a group that you want to move, but, you know, you can wait a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I can be more forgiving because I know I can put more animals on that trailer at that time
Right.
and make it more affordable for everybody across the board.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons why you and I do so much.
Yes. Yep.
And I mean, you've got a flat price on everything we haul.
Right. Yep.
Because I can haul your cows from here to Washington to South Carolina.
Yep.
They're all going to cost about the same money.
Yep.
Because we worked on our schedules together.
Yes.
We've communicated so well with these things and with our clients.
Yes.
Letting them know, hey, this is what we're doing.
Right.
And they work with that. And then when it comes to payment, I tell my people all the time, you know, cash, check, Venmo, PayPal, it's all easy. I really don't sweat about being bounce checks or anything else because I do tell people all the time I won't ever take a check from a horse person. I always take a check from a cow person. And the reason being is typically cow people have to work for a living.
Yeah. Yep.
We have, you know, horses are not necessities, our cows are.
Sure. Yep.
That's how we build an operation.
Right.
So again, I'm very respectful of the fact of what they have to do, and so you know, I don't sweat checks and stuff like that too much, and I just kind of go with it. And the fact is, if you write a bad check, the whole country's going to know. Right,
everybody's going to know. Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
I don't have to say anything normally.
Right.
You know, it comes down the pike later on.
Oh yeah. Yep.
But no, that's really it's the payment part is pretty simple. My biggest thing is making sure again the cattle arrive safely and healthy, and you know the clients are happy.
Yeah.
You know, because that always gets me repeat business and stuff. And of course, if I get repeat business, I get it from the buyers and the sellers, and my little mini empire just keeps building.
Oh yeah, I say I use you for pretty well every animal that ever leaves here anymore, and I recommend you to clients. And they recommend you to their, you know what I mean, and buyers and sellers. And I mean, it just, at this point, I mean, at the end of the day, I know I can send cattle with you. I know they're going to get there safely. I know they're going to get there cost effectively. I know that I'm going to know where they are. I know that the client's going to know where they are. You know, I mean, and it's a big deal. It's a huge weight off my shoulders to not have to personally move them that kind of distance. Coming around to equipment, everybody's going to want to know, or at least I want to know for sure, favorite trucks. Favorite and least favorite trucks.
Ooh. Least favorite's easy, Chevys. Yeah. I'll throw that right out there right now. Chevys, GMCs, always will forever be my least favorite. They make a tremendous gas truck, but they do not make a hauling truck. And there can be a few guys out there that can say whatever they want, and I'm sure some will at some point. They'll have comments or whatever. Yeah. But until you drive for a living, Chevys ain't going to cut it. I used to say Dodges were my first. my first passion for good hauling trucks. I grew up being a Ford guy, went to a Dodge when Ford let the 7.3. And then in 2020, I had a 2020 Ram and blew the motor 130,000 miles. And Dodge looked at me and said, well, Mr. Chandler, it just happens. I went back to Fords. And the funny part to that is I had a 17 Ram. I had 850,000 miles on. I'd never touched transmission. I'd only touched that motor one time, and that was for injectors. And that was one single injector.
Yeah.
But I've got Fords at my 17 Platinum. Put 580,000 miles on it. Never had a major breakdown until 407,000 miles when I lost transmission.
Yeah.
My 18 has 360,000 miles on it. My 19 has 160,000 miles on it. And we have a 21 that has like 50,000 miles on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's Tina's truck. I don't get to drive that one too much.
50,000 miles. I mean, that's only like what, like 6 months for you? It's like,
That was like a month and a half. I mean, now it might be. I have slowed down a lot. But no, it's the Fords because of the power they've got, especially these newer Fords.
Yeah.
They've got since 20, they put these 10-speed transmissions in, and they really cast me out when it comes to pulling, mileage, comfort, everything. I grew up being poor and whatnot, so I never had a really nice truck.
Sure.
And then when I went from the Dodges to the Fords, the only thing I could find was a Platinum, and it was $80,000. I'm like, my God, this is going to kill me, But it had air-conditioned seats, and the seats laid all the way down, and that became my first love right there as far as pickups, because that thing, because I sleep in my trucks. When I'm loaded, I sleep in my truck.
Yeah.
I'm never probably more than 150, 200 feet from my animals when I'm loaded.
Right.
I like that. I like being close to them. And so that truck is definitely my first pull. I mean, it's my first pick, my first passion. That's always. I just wish Tina would let me drive the 21, but she won't. It's just the way it's going to be, I reckon.
So looking at the Dodge, what year was the Dodge?
That Dodge was a 2017.
So the 17 Dodge
it was
did
a
real good
6.7
for you.
motor.
Okay. And then 17, 18, and 19 Platinum.
Yep.
Those have all been good for you on the Fords. And those have all been 1 tons or?
They've all been one
All
tons.
been 1
yeah.
tons,
I
yeah.
run everything 1
Yep.
ton dually 4-wheel drives.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the dually for the stability of the trucks.
Yeah.
Running down the highways, the 4-wheel drive is just because of some of the places I have to go. Sometimes it's just
Sure.
required.
Oh, yeah.
But I will say this though, now for the 4-wheel drive on a Ford, they are weak. I love the Dodge 4-wheel drives better.
Yeah.
But again, when it comes to comfort, mileage, performance, Fords are all day long.
Yeah.
There's just no getting around it.
Yeah.
And they look good. They
Oh,
do
yeah.
look really sharp.
They do look good.
Now mine right now doesn't look quite as sharp, but it's dirty. I don't really care. It has to work for a living.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to my trailers, I'll jump over my trailers real quick because I'm very blessed in the fact that I've got my 21 Wilson is an air ride with worm flooring, 2 escape doors, 3 cut gates, floating cut gates, the whole 9 yards. It is the cat's meow.
Yeah.
That is the cat's ass. But that trailer, and that being said, it snapped an axle, and I've been waiting on it to be fixed for almost 8 months now. So that's been the downside. But they're by far my favorite trailers to pull.
Yeah.
They just Wilson. Nobody could do it better than Wilson when it came to manufacturing trailers with the rivet manufacturing.
Sure.
But I also have the Elites. I love the Elites for the sheer fact that when you button those things up, they will keep a trailer a lot warmer. It's really nice. And Elite, when it comes to manufacturing, they can turn one out for you in 90 days and they'll build you anything you want. And that's a really nice thing.
Yeah,
Wilson takes almost a year. Actually, they're almost 15 months now in manufacture dates for a custom built. Whereas Elite will turn one out in 90 days for you, whatever you want. And that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Especially doing what we do.
Right.
Because we like
Right.
to, our rigs go through a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And they don't last very long.
Sure.
And that's the downfall to any of this as far as the trailers go, because
Right.
The highway miles are great, but the highways ain't what they used to be.
Right. What's your preferred length, preferred width, number of cuts? How do you option it out? If you build a trailer, how do you option?
I want at least 32 feet.
32. Okay.
I want at least 32 feet.
2 or
so
3
I get
axles?
2 is fine.
2 axles?
I'd rather have 3.
Yeah.
But if you have 3, you really have to know how to drive, and you can't let anybody else drive it. Because,
Right. Take a corner too tight.
Yeah,
and
the
you shred
center
your,
axle
shred
just
your center,
shreds
yeah.
it.
Yep.
But if I'm running with twin axles, I'm running 10Ks or 12Ks.
Yeah.
I get as heavy duty as they'll actually allow me to have.
Yeah.
Just for the sheer safety of knowing I've got the right weight on me.
Right.
Under my trailer there. And then I want at least 4 cuts. I prefer multiple what we call floating cut gates.
Right,
Floating
right,
cut
right.
gates adjust the size of my boxes. So if I only have a couple bulls, I can jam them up a little tighter. Or if I have baby calves,
Right,
I can sort
right,
my baby
right.
calves off off
Yep.
the group
Yep.
and keep my calves safe.
Yep,
Because
yep,
again,
yep.
these animals are my first priority.
Yep.
So whenever I do my trailers to make sure I've got your advantage, your safety in mind
Yep,
for your
yep.
babies.
Right.
And then calf slides, of course, if
Yep.
I can have them on my trailers.
Right.
I have a slide gate on my back of my Elite. I'm not a fan of that. I'd much rather have the roll door. I just don't happen to have that on that one.
Gotcha.
Elite doesn't allow that option. And then if you can get away with it, have multiple escape doors,
Yeah. Yep.
just
yep,
for
yep,
sheer
yep.
safety, or being able to
Yeah.
take care of your stock if you want to.
Oh yeah, yeah. Being able to get in and
Because
out where
I've
you need,
definitely
when you
loaded
need.
and unloaded in the side of escape doors before. Bumped up trailers or had
Yep.
trailers bump me because,
Yep.
again, it's just what I do for a living.
Right.
And I'll make them
right.
all work.
Right. Right. Finding a way to get them on and off. If
Yeah.
they're in the middle, and what you got to do is meet another trailer, that's sure a handy way to get it
Yes.
done. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's talent that I like to exploit. So, I'm a braggart in that part of it, but yeah, I like to be very on the edge of what I do.
Sure. Sure.
So I'm proud of the business. I'm proud of the life I've built for myself and my family, and
Yeah, you bet.
the reputation I built from doing with this.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's just been so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hauling cows for some of these Wagyu and Akiushi breeders it's been more than fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of breeders. I've met a lot of folks, and I get to watch the breed. Like I said earlier, I get to watch the breed grow.
Yeah.
And I get to watch it grow from their first jump.
Absolutely.
So,
what are some of the things when you load up your trailer, as far as just supplies, that you say, hey, I've got my 17 to 19 Platinum, I've got my 32-foot Wilson, and it's set up how I want, it's built how I want. What are some of the things you make sure you have on board to make sure your trip goes smooth?
I've always got at least one pitchfork,
Yep.
one scoop shovel,
Yep.
always.
Yep.
I have to have multiple bags of shavings on board. I require that we all have extra shavings on hand.
Yep.
Because I want shavings on the deck of the trailer at all times.
Sure.
Water buckets,
Yep.
in case you happen to get to a barn that doesn't have buckets or
Sure.
doesn't have a water
Yep.
trough.
Yep.
Fill up all the buckets you can and fill them up till the cows are done drinking.
You bet.
We actually carry hay nets for the cows. Well, I'll actually fill,
Right. Hey,
So I'll hang a hay net up from the side of the trailer. So if the cows happen to want to, I'll never hang a trailer inside a water bucket
Yep.
inside the trailer, but I'll always hang a hay net.
Yeah.
Because if the cows choose to eat, let them eat.
Right.
Let them have at
You bet.
it.
Yep.
They do have a tendency to destroy the hay nuts a little more often than
Right.
anything else. But it's a luxury. Depending on the animal, I'll give them that luxury if they don't have horns.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's rattle paddles, some sorting sticks. I never carry a hot shot on the rig, ever. I do carry a rope on there in case I need to rope something if we're to get away or if I need help getting something loaded.
Right.
Ironically enough, I've never broke the rope out.
Yeah.
Still brand new, and it's 6 years old. Trying to think. I always have impact
Yep.
for my truck and trailer.
Yep.
I always have a extra set of steps so I can drive my trailers up on it so I can take my tires off.
Yep.
And I always make those out of 2x6 or 2x8s.
Yep.
Just screw them together.
Yep.
Couple of spare tires.
Yep.
Couple of spare filters for the truck.
Yep.
And that's really it.
Yeah.
It's a pretty basic situation, but
You bet.
my shavings, my buckets, they're guaranteed given anywhere I go.
Right. Right.
Keeping
right.
those with me because I want the animals healthy and clean,
You
as
bet.
clean as possible.
You bet. So I guess wrapping up and looking at all of it, I mean, we've gone through your whole process, how you do it, what you do it with, and then dealing with the different clients that you do. I mean, wrapping it up, if somebody's looking at doing work with Rough Ride Cattle Services, walk us through what are the common characteristics of your favorite clients to haul for? What are the common characteristics of your least favorite clients to haul for? As far as what can
that's a loaded
somebody
question,
do?
brother.
What can somebody do to be a good client? If they call you up and say, hey, I want you to haul for me, what do they need to do so that you want to keep hauling for them?
Have patience. Sometimes, more importantly than anything, have some patience.
Yeah.
Understand that I am very busy.
Yep.
And I don't, if somebody calls me or they text me, don't be offended if I don't get back to you right away.
Sure.
I do forget sometimes. I'm notorious for forgetting, unfortunately. So having that grace, having the patience to know I will get you scheduled up as fast as possible
You bet.
with the most economical numbers in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's probably, that's about my most favorite thing. If you can understand, I've got 1,000 things to do,
Right.
and I'm trying to get them all done at one time.
Right.
dealing with drivers, dealing with clients, dealing with rigs, dealing with logistics. I mean, I've run up to 5 rigs at one time on the highway.
Yep.
And somehow I know I keep all the rats in my head.
Right.
And it causes aneurysms every once in a while.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I make it work.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest thing, because right now, especially right now, we're getting ready to hit some big sales.
Yeah. Yep.
We've had Akushi sales, the Wagyu sales, the online sales, live animals, plus I haul for Hereford and Angus breeders.
Yeah. Yep.
So it covers a lot of breeds and a lot of spectrums for us. But the people that are demanding, that's probably my least favorite.
Right.
I've got to have it
right.
tomorrow. Okay,
Right.
but you just called me today.
Yeah.
Or
Everyone figures they're top of the list. I think they just don't realize how long the list is.
Well,
and how
that-
many people need your services and how few you. I mean, you don't need their business as much as they need you to haul it. I think
appreciate
if
that.
people grasp, like, hey, you need to not be giving David a hard time about the what, the when, the where, the how, the why. You need to be grateful he's going to get it done, because you could ditch a whole bunch of clients and still be booked as full as you wanted to
yes,
be booked.
and well, honestly, that's the blessing of it all.
Yeah.
Because I've worked for it, I've earned it, and I love it. I mean, and my clients know I love the business.
Oh, yeah.
I love taking care of their stock for them.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely have a couple that I've told to pack sand
Right. Yeah.
and
yep.
never ever regret about it.
Right.
And they'll call it, 2-3 months later.
Yeah.
Is there a chance? No.
No.
You got a better chance of going to heaven than you
Right. Right.
do, me loading for you. And that's just God. That's just the truth of that one.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, because it is a very demanding business,
Yep.
and it's
Yep.
demanding on every angle. Because I have to
Oh,
get
yeah.
with the seller, make sure he's got they have their paperwork,
Oh yeah.
And I've got sellers that they'll drag their feet. They'll wait till the last minute.
Right. Right.
And this is a deal where communication comes in.
Yep.
And this is an advice to sellers. Once you pull the trigger, make sure your buyer gets their stuff together.
Yeah,
Make sure
yeah.
they get that paperwork
Yep,
ready.
Yep. Yep.
Because, I mean, whether it be 2 days, 10 days, 20 days, I'll get your stock.
Yeah.
All right, we'll have it picked up and it will be to you ASAP.
Yep. Yep.
But they need to have all their paperwork in order.
People got to be ready.
There's a lot of folks out there that, they wait till the last minute to pull the trigger on getting a trick test. And the trick test is, again, to me, the trick test is probably the most critical thing because it takes so long.
Yeah. Yep.
You got to schedule it to get in the vet, and you got 7 days to wait after you get it done.
Right.
And I'm not hauling without your trick.
Right.
And again, every state's a little different. And make sure you check your state requirements.
Right.
Or the state you're shipping into, because every state's different.
Yep.
They all require something a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, most of my clients I like, but the ones I don't, I've been dwindling away because I am.
Oh yeah. It's
I like hauling for good folks.
Tough clients are the same as tough cattle, and they're in a need for them. You know what I mean? It's just like we focus on multiplying the best cattle and eliminating the rest of them. It's the same deal with clients and with people you work with. There's too many good people to work with to worry about the ones that, if they're going to get worked up or going to get wound up or going to give you a hard time or not be grateful for the work it is that you're doing and the timeline it takes to do it, and understand the effort involved. Let them do it themselves then.
Yep.
Hop in a truck and drive across the country and see
That's
just
right.
how cost effectively you can move one from point A to point B when it chews up the amount of time and effort that it does.
Or you blow a
Get to
tire.
move
and
these out. That's
alternator.
right. Or you blow a transmission in the middle of the road Thanksgiving
right.
weekend.
Yeah, that's
you know what I
right.
mean? Let them live it for a minute, and I think they'll get it. But that's my hope sitting down here together today to kind of walk through that whole setting there, David, is that people will understand, that it is. It's a significant endeavor. I am grateful that you do it. I understand what it is, at least in a minor sense. I've not done near the quantity you have, but I've done enough to grasp, like, this is a job, and I'm grateful for the way you do it. I'm
I
grateful for
appreciate
how
that.
well
I
you
truly
do
do
it,
something.
and I mean, we're going to keep sending cattle with you for as long as you're willing to take them,
Well, I ain't dying yet, and I ain't planning on dying tomorrow, brother. So you're stuck with me for a while and hauling.
Well, I appreciate
And,
it,
of
brother.
course, we have more cows to buy from you.
Yeah,
So
you bet.
we
You
have
bet.
the one heifer already from you, and we have some semen and embryos
bet.
and whatnot. And truthfully, I don't know what all Tina's bought from you so far.
Well, we got another auction coming May 7th.
Oh,
so
I know. She's
we
all
can
geared up
keep
for that one,
adding,
too. She's all geared up for that one, brother. She's, of course, we got a couple heifers out there you and I saw today that
They're beauties.
They're going to end up being on somebody's bucket list.
Yeah.
Probably
you
mine.
Bet. You bet, brother.
But,
you bet.
yeah, no, it's a business I truly do love and truly do enjoy doing it every
Yep.
day of the week.
Yep.
I mean, even when I'm sore, I still get up every morning. I'm enjoying my life, and I enjoy the business, and
Right.
I enjoy everything that's brought to my table.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
truly have. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Well, and I appreciate you taking the time and putting in the effort, David, even hurting today, after dealing with some mishaps and putting in the time and the effort to make that flight and get up here to Idaho and sit down with me and record.
Oh, bro,
I mean, I don't take it lightly. I
love
appreciate
coming
it.
up here and visiting with y'all.
I appreciate it. Well, thanks so much for being here, brother, and we'll look forward to catching you on another one of these on the God
Anytime
Any
you're
Cows
ready.
podcast.
Heck yeah.
You're the man, brother. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Got Any Cows podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, and visit us anytime at gotanycows.com.